Hey guys, Nikki here. I'm here for the second time because my camera was giving me issues, to bring you a video about my favorite reads by Black authors. This is in honor of Black History Month. I do like to read these authors throughout the year. However, it made sense to make the video this month, and I have been reading some other books by Black authors this month that just didn't make it onto this list. It's not that they're terrible, but these are my favorite. So to start, I'll start with N.K. Jemisin. I have 2 books by her that I highly, highly recommend, and that is The Fifth Season, and The City We Became. The 5th season is a high fantasy. It's in a complete another world. You have this magic system called orogeny, which is earth and stone and crystal and mineral manipulation. The main character you follow was is highly talented and highly skilled in this magic. And you follow her and these 2 other perspectives, and it does a weird thing with like a second person point of view, but basically it's the apocalypse, and she has discovered that her husband murdered one of her children and has taken the other one, and she is trying to go after them to save her daughter. The City We Became, urban, low fantasy. You have people representing the boroughs of New York, and New York itself is represented in a single person, and the point is to kind of birth the city, and the people representing the boroughs are trying to do this and save the city against this great evil. Brilliant story. First time I picked it up, I had a hard time with it, but I was in the middle of a reading slump. Second time I picked it up, brilliant, couldn't get enough of it. Next are 2 books by Octavia E. Butler. One is The Parable of the Sower by her, and the other one is Kindred. Parable of the Sower is kind of a speculative science fiction future setting. In the book, it is the year 2024, startlingly close. The main character is the daughter of a reverend in this small neighborhood, which is pretty isolated from other neighborhoods because they're trying to keep out gun violence and drugs, and they're dealing with poverty because the economy's collapsing because of global warming. And there's illnesses going around. Hits very close to home. Just a heads up. And it's kind of her, you keep getting these parables of the sower at the beginning of each chapter, and you slowly kind of find out that it's like this kind of religion way of ideology that she's kind of coming up with, and this is the story of how she developed it. Next is Kindred. This is a woman from the 70s going back to like 1800s something, to the plantation that owned the slaves that are her ancestors. And she meets basically who her ancestors are going to be. And it's rough. You get to see the treatment, which is horrific. You get to see her kind of empathize a little bit and try to change this one character who is also an ancestor of hers, but just like, it's so hard for her to do anything because she's there so intermittently over with large gaps of time between visits. It is horrifying. It is amazing. Octavia E. Butler is a master writer, but it is horrifying, the violence that is kind of both described and insinuated. Next is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is a more contemporary piece. It's about these 2 girls born in like small racist town. They're white passing, and it follows them to a certain point. One decides to continue to white pass, the other does not. She has a child with a man with very dark skin, so her child is very, very dark skinned, and it's kind of dealing with, for lack of a better term, like the consequences of their decisions. And then you end up following the girls as well, and just kind of like the lives they live, the fears they have, the trials they go through because of the choices they make. It's very slow moving, but it's very thoughtful, very interesting. It's just incredibly hard to, it's so interesting to see the 2 points of view and like the 2 big choices that they made. Next is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dare. This is about a young girl who's basically an indentured servant, and she's trying to get out of that world. She wanted to get out of it before she became an indentured servant, but like the poverty of her family prevented it. And now she has this opportunity to get out of it, but it's a lot of work, and just there's so many things working against her and one person working for her, and it's just heartbreaking and heartwarming, and it's just deeply emotional. I highly recommend it because it does have a very uplifting ending, but it is very hard to take if you're not expecting it to hit that hard emotionally. Next is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is another high fantasy. It is a very intricate world with a lot of, I think, magic based on some Nigerian folklore and basically a Nigerian sorceress. I can't remember the exact name. I looked it up before, and I'm so bad with stuff like that. However, brilliant story. Can't recommend it enough. You follow this main character and I think her brother, and they're trying to escape from these people who are trying to kill her because somebody actually accidentally touched an artifact and it like rekindled magic in a bunch of people, including people that supposedly shouldn't be magic. And yeah, it was just so intriguing, and like following this girl who is fighting against this really conservative, like ideologically conservative government, and like the very strict, and it's so intriguing. I absolutely adore it. Next is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This one I'm sure everybody knows about. It was huge the year it came out. You follow Star, who witnesses her friend getting shot after they get stopped by police, and Angie Thomas does a brilliant job working with, like, showing the fallout of that situation, both with Star and her grief and PTSD, and the way the community is coming up around this boy, and the death of this boy, and what it's doing to drive the community forward and drive Star forward. It is a heart-wrenching book that is so heartwarming, and I love watching Star go through her growth, and it's just so incredibly well done. And I do intend to pick up Concrete Rose, which is a story about Star's father and how he got to be the man you meet in her story. Next is Caste: The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. This is actually a nonfiction, and it takes a look at racism in the States, specifically for African Americans, and analyzes it the same way that the caste system in India has traditionally been looked at. And the parallels are both horrifying, but I think also do a really good job to like really nail home what exactly is the major issues. And it doesn't necessarily give it gives tons of answers about how we get around it, but it's just to have that established base of this is what's going on, and really putting it into perspective for people who don't necessarily deal with these same things was just incredibly eye-opening. I highly recommend it. It's a brilliant book. And then finally, I have The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is another high fantasy. And I have 3 of them on this list. And it's a YA fantasy, so it does have a very cringy, eye-rolly love interest and romance. But there's so much of the story is also the power of friendships within women, the differences of these girls who are selected to fight for the kingdom, when historically and traditionally they are tortured until they stay dead. Because these girls, at a certain age, you get cut. If your blood is gold, then what happens is they realize that you have some kind of magic in you, and they will torture you different ways until you get your true death and can't come back, which is horrific and just like, whoa. But these girls end up going to the capital. They end up training, learning to fight, learning to protect themselves, learning to protect the kingdom. It's both empowering but horrifying, because you have the heavy weight of, if they weren't doing this, they'd be dead, or they'd be on their way to dying. And it was an incredible story. Like I said, I loved the friendships between the girls that you meet and your main character, Decca. I love what you find out about the creatures that they are being rounded up to fight against, and just learning more of the history of their world and where like you kind of get a sense that things are corrupted, and it kind of explores what happened. And whew, it was amazing. I can't recommend it enough. My mom and sister and I all read this. We took turns reading it out loud to each other. It was a great time and just a brilliant story. And with that, I'll leave you here. Hopefully that was shorter and sweeter than my first one that caused my camera to get angry with me. And with that, I will leave you here. Please comment below for any book recommendations you have for me based on this list. And let me know what you thought of the books I listed. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.